Many of our favorite games get sequels, and that's usually a certainty if a game sells well and receives positive reviews. Some video game franchises have endured through multiple decades with new entries, spin-offs, reboots, remakes, and remasters. That said, occasionally a game will receive an installment which completely shifts away from the original title in terms of tone, theme, or gameplay. There are some games which have been much bleaker and more dismal than anything that came before them. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video game sequels that went super dark. Number 10. Shadow the Hedgehog. The Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has certainly been a troubled one, with multiple muddled entries and games that were downright bizarre, bonkers, and bad. So when Sega released Shadow the Hedgehog in 2005, none of us were entirely surprised at the mature themes and dark aesthetic on display. The game follows Shadow as he tears through the non-linear levels with guns and other weapons to unravel his past, since he's suffering from amnesia. Oh, and of course you're also fending off an alien invasion, fighting against the race called the Black Arms. The game was much darker and more mature than any other game before it in the franchise, since the Sonic titles were always colorful, optimistic adventures with a bubbly cast of lovable characters. Shadow the Hedgehog actually received an E10+ rating from the ESRB for mild fantasy violence and some profanity, becoming the first ever entry in the long-running game series to have the rating. While the game didn't review particularly well, something we did enjoy is the non-linear story and multiple endings. Depending on the path you take through the game and the decisions you make, different outcomes will be achieved, which range from setting out to take on the Black Arms invasion or a decision to destroy the planet. Number 9. Alice Madness Returns. In the year 2000, game designer American McGee, who'd previously worked at id Software on Doom and Quake titles, released the game Alice. American McGee's Alice was a third-person action-adventure game based on Alice in Wonderland, but featured a much gloomier, more violent version of Lewis Carroll's classic tales. You took control of Alice, whose family are killed in a house fire and ends up in a psychiatric clinic, in which she takes a mental journey to Wonderland, which is twisted by her fragmented mind. Can't get much darker than that, right? Wrong. In the follow-up to this game, Alice Madness Returns, players find themselves spiraling back down the mental rabbit hole into Wonderland once again, this time encountering a new evil force of monsters, creatures, and villains. This game featured much more terrifying enemy design, such as the particularly terrifying Dollmaker, who sports multiple extra limbs and a dark substance oozing from his hollow eye cavities. Alice Madness Returns also twisted everyday items into deadly weapons, such as the pepper grinder Gatling gun, a hobby horse hammer, and the teapot cannon, which is used to burn enemies alive. Yeah. Number 8. DARKSPORE. Spore was a simulation strategy game that tasked us with the development of a species from a microscopic state, evolving and adapting the creatures into an intelligent and social life form. The goofy, quirky creations were charming and funny, with colorful visuals and environments. Then, they made DARKSPORE. DARKSPORE is a spin-off from the Spore series with a fully fledged sci-fi story following a race of alien scientists called the Progenitors. The Progenitors were conducting genetic modification experiments and accidentally created a race of genetic mutants known as the DARKSPORE. You're tasked with purging the galaxy of the evil mutants, with a hero that you can genetically modify using an adapted creature editor from the original Spore title. Body parts, armor, and weapons can all be customized by spending DNA collected throughout the game, with a much more brutal lineup of body modifications and mutants across a range of corrupted planets. This is a much darker outing than the original Spore. The game was met with mixed reception, and after some struggles with server functionality, the game was shut down and is no longer playable. Number 7. The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Somewhat unusually for the series, which usually features standalone games, Majora's Mask released in the year 2000 as a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, and was a complete tonal shift from the previous title. Set 2 months after Ocarina of Time, you play as Link once again, who discovers that the moon will crash into the world and bring about the apocalypse in 3 days. The horrifying and ominous moon that's slowly descending towards the world filled us with a sense of dread and impending doom that was was never present in the previous Legend of Zelda titles, despite those games featuring some scary enemies and areas. With themes of death, loss, and grief, it remains the most emotionally complex entry in the long-running game series. Number 6. Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. In 2010, Castlevania Lords of Shadow released for the PS3, Xbox 360, and PC, and modernized the series with polished 3D graphics, enhanced animations, and improved gameplay mechanics. In this third-person action game, we took control of Gabriel Belmont, a member of a group of holy knights known as the Brotherhood of Light, tasked with defending people against supernatural forces. You're guided across the destroyed world, gathering fragments of a god mask in order to bring your dead wife back to life. Despite the already gothic dark story and themes, the sequel took it to another level. So how exactly did Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 accomplish this? Well, returning protagonist Gabriel is now Dracula, and the game opens with you brutally murdering an entire family one by one and drinking their blood to restore your power. Yeah, it went there. You then set out on a journey to kill your old nemesis Satan through a series of bleak environments and newly introduced tense stealth sections. Number 5. DMC Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry is a series of action-adventure games following demon hunter Dante fighting off monsters in stylish combo-based combat. Dante and the accompanying cast of characters are hilariously goofy, constantly cracking jokes throughout the game and its weird and wild cutscenes. After 4 great entries and an HD collection, Capcom decided to reboot the series with Studio Ninja Theory handling the development. In the rebooted game DMC Devil May Cry, you take control of Dante in a parallel universe who sports a younger, more modern aesthetic. With the campy humor of Dante and the cartoony demons long gone, the new character is more cool and edgy, taking on corrupt politicians, corporations, and the media. This serious tonal shift attempted a critique of modern society, and the storyline introducing them as demonic entities was a refreshing change from the earlier titles. The game also features grittier, creepier locations for Dante to battle demons in, using his signature dual pistols, Ebony and Ivory. Although many of us enjoyed the reboot, some diehard fans of the Devil May Cry series were less than impressed, resulting in the next game in the series continuing the original timeline with Devil May Cry 5. Number 4. Bomberman Act 0. Bomberman is a game series we've all seen or played at some point, with the iconic main character being one of the most recognizable mascots in all of the industry. Originally released in 1983 for various computer systems, the franchise has gone on to release dozens of games across several platforms. In 2003, we were baffled when developer Hudson Soft released Bomberman Act 0, a dark, dystopian, and more realistic Bomberman title, which was a significant departure from the arcade-style cartoony feel-good games that had made up the series before it. You play as a Bomberman fighting to the surface of the Earth to escape across both single and multiplayer modes. The game was crushingly difficult, with 99 levels and no save options, meaning almost nobody that played the game went on to complete it. It turns out darker doesn't always equate to better. Act 0 was ripped apart by critics for having horrendous loading times, tedious gameplay, and infuriating camera angles. Games Radar and The Guardian even put this bizarre Bomberman entry in their lists of the worst video games of all time. Ouch. Number 3. Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is an iconic game series that's endured from its original release in the 1990s, with many entries across several gaming systems. The games were mostly optimistic adventure titles with protagonist Lara Croft hunting down priceless artifacts across the world, and encountering supernatural phenomena along the way. That is, until the 2013 reboot, simply titled Tomb Raider. This admittedly excellent modern reboot plunges Lara into danger almost immediately, with our heroine plunged into the ocean before making her way into a treacherous tomb where she can be set on fire, impaled, and crushed by rocks if you aren't careful. You're then captured by bandits, and in an effort to escape, you must engage in a quick-time event to shoot an assailant in the head, spilling his blood all over Miss Croft, and leaving her emotionally tormented at taking the life of another human so early on into the game. From the relatively tame puzzle adventure games where you fought off animals and dinosaurs, to a gritty, dark journey where a young Lara Croft must kill to survive, and take a pretty good beating along the way, one of the biggest shifts in tone in all of gaming gaming history, these modern Tomb Raider titles are loved by fans and critics alike. Number 2. Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time was a refreshing game experience which introduced us to an innovative time mechanic, where you can rewind events if you mess up a platforming section and freeze enemies in combat. In the city of Azad, you play as an unnamed prince who's trying to revert the actions of the evil sultan, who transformed the inhabitants of the place into fierce monsters that he can control. Despite the monsters, this adventure is a fairly optimistic one, and the prince is a charismatic protagonist who strives to save the people of Azad, which features bright, extravagant environments. The follow-up to this classic game, Prince of Persia: Warrior Within, is a much darker outing, featuring brutal finisher moves and a much bleaker story and level design. After the events of the first game, the prince finds himself hunted by a dark entity. Said entity is set on killing him to restore the intended events of the timeline that were disrupted by releasing the Sands of Time. With much more death, destruction, and demons, this sequel was much darker in tone compared to the relatively chipper original Sands of Time. Number 1. Jak 2. Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy was one of the best 3D action-adventure platformers ever made, quickly cementing the dynamic duo as PlayStation mascots for years to come. With an innovative open level design, colorful environments, and quirky characters, this is one of the best feel-good games of all time. We loved furry sidekick Daxter's constant quips and speeches if you die in the game, and the angry, eccentric mannerisms of the Green Sage. If you 100% the game, picking up all the collectibles scattered across the varied sections, a cutscene will play in which our band of merry heroes enter into a portal. Jak 2 completely shifts the series on its head, thrusting the player from a happy fantasy island into a dark dystopian city filled with weapons, vehicles, and corporations. Previously silent protagonist Jak has been captured and experimented on, infused with dark eco, and discovers he can now speak, developing a badass personality much to the surprise of the goofy as ever Daxter. Equipped with various guns and the ability to ride a hoverboard, Jak and Daxter navigate through the treacherous story, which is much more difficult than the original game. Jak 2 remains one of the most drastic tonal shifts ever in a video game sequel. Those are our picks, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other video game sequels that went super dark. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.